We've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well.
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Today, President Biden is presenting a Supreme Court reform package, and he's pushing for some reform, something he says he'd like to get done before he leaves office in January. We'll talk about that today. And the family of Tupac has reportedly hired lawyers and are preparing to sue Diddy as reports continue to insinuate that Diddy paid $1 million allegedly to have Tupac killed. We'll have a little bit more on that as well. And Alma Powell, the wife of Secretary Colin Powell, has died. A little bit more on that as well. And it is the 90th anniversary of the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, one of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's uh, older publications in Minneapolis. We're going to tell you how they plan to celebrate, what they have been able to accomplish in their 90 years, and what do they see coming up as we speak with Tracy Dillard Williams, the publisher of the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. But first, the president has called for a sweeping overhaul of the Supreme Court and a constitutional amendment to limit presidential power. This move signals his intent to tackle deep seated issues within the American judiciary. In a compelling op-ed that he published, the president underscored the need for reforms to restore public trust and integrity in the nation's highest court. He says, I served as a U.S. Senator for 36 years, including as chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. He says, I have overseen more Supreme Court nominations as a senator, vice president, and president than anyone living today. The president had earlier, of course, as you know, stepped aside and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the next president. And he said he maintains great respect for America's institutions and separation of powers. He says what is happening now is not normal, and it undermines the public's confidence in the court's decisions, including those impacting personal freedoms. He says we now stand in a breach. Very strong words from the president on the Supreme Court. His most striking proposal is a constitutional amendment to ensure that former presidents are not immune from federal criminal indictments, trials, and convictions, or sentencing, as we've seen this Supreme Court, this conservative Supreme Court rule that presidents, specifically in this case, they were ruling about Donald Trump, are immune. Um, the president says we are a nation of laws, not of kings or dictators. His assertion comes in direct response to, as we said, the Supreme Court's ruling that shields certain presidential actions from prosecution, a decision that has provided a lifeline to Trump as he continues to face his legal battles, being 34 times convicted as a felon in New York, and with about 50 some odd felony charges still hanging over his head. Donald Trump has the support of the Supreme Court, and this is something that Biden really wants to see come to an end. He further advocated for imposing term limits on Supreme Court justices. He suggested that 18-year terms, which would, in his view, prevent any single presidency from exerting multi-generational influence over the judiciary. He says term limits would help ensure that the court's membership changes with some regularity and reduce the chance that any single presidency radically alters the makeup of the court for generations to come. He also called on Congress to enforce stringent ethics, I should say, requirements on Supreme Court justices. We know that they have really exploited the lack of oversight to the Supreme Court, lack of ethics with the Supreme Court has been thoroughly exploited by the conservative justices on the bench. Now, Biden said this is common sense. He says the court's current voluntary ethics code is weak and self-enforced. He's expected to elaborate on his op-ed and his proposals in a speech at the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Texas, as part of the 60th anniversary celebration of the Civil Rights Act. That event was initially scheduled for mid-July, but it was postponed following the alleged assassination attempt on Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Last week from the Oval Office, the president did address the nation, explaining his decisions to end his reelection campaign and outlined his plans for his remaining time in office, including his call for Supreme Court reform. So uh, the president is really coming out swinging on this, and Vice President Kamala Harris, who continues to build support, as of about 4 o'clock on Monday, there were 80,000 white men signed up for a white men for Kamala Harris call. Um, so the final tally, I guess we'll get at some point how many came in, but this follows, of course, the successful calls by Black women, Black men, um, and white women. And now it is white men's it's their turn at bat as they go to bat for Vice President Kamala Harris. Very interesting stuff. A real interesting turn of events. Because imagine if she does get the support. You're talking about 80,000 white men have signed up, as like I said, as of 4 o'clock on Monday for that call. Um, Imagine she gets that support. Wow. What we are seeing is really a monumental, I should say, shift from where Democrats stood just a week and a half ago. Some really interesting news led by TMZ and others. They're reporting that Tupac Shakur's family is clearly disturbed over an alleged or an allegation that Diddy may have helped play a major role in Tupac's murder. Something they're now, as they say, digging into with a new legal team who plans to, quote, get to the bottom of it and force action if they find anything there. Sources are reporting to TMZ that, and they claim to have direct knowledge of the family and are inside the family. Said that the relatives have retained attorneys Alex Spiro and Christopher Clore, as well as a team of investigators to look into Keefe D's resurfaced allegations that Diddy offered to pay him and his crew $1 million to take Tupac out in the 1990s. You'll recall this claim, which thus far has not been confirmed or substantiated, came to light last week when prosecutors in Keefe D's murder case included an old transcript from an interview he did in 2009 where he allegedly, I should say he alleged that Diddy was willing to pay as much as $1 million for a hit on Tupac. Um, According to the outlet, family members said that they feel that there might be something to this claim, and with the legal team they brought on, they are hoping to dig up any potential evidence that exists to corroborate these claims. The two attorneys said that they plan to run down any and all leads, and they are soliciting more leads and more information. So it's something to watch, particularly given all of the issues that Diddy is currently facing. Um, there's a grand jury in New York supposedly looking into some criminal allegations or a criminal prosecution, a federal criminal prosecution against Diddy. So lots going on in Diddy's world. Just when you think they start to quiet down a little bit, something else pops up. I think Diddy is really in a lot of trouble. And of course, the thing about the allegations with Tupac, you must remember this: there's absolutely no statute of limitations on murder, and that includes the solicitation of murder. So we don't know what, if any, role Diddy may have played in that. Of course, they're going. There's a lot of folks who looking at the old East Coast West Coast feud from the '90s, and of course, the we saw the murder of Biggie Smalls. Um, so it's really a powder keg that could really boil over if any of this proves to be true. Wow, you talk about reigniting some dangerous old feuds. This would be it. This really would be something that they I don't know that hip hop could recover from. That if Diddy is found to be in any way responsible for the death of Tupac, just not sure how they are able to how the genre can recover. You talk about some sort of civil war going on here and other problems, or maybe maybe we a little overestimated it now because there are no more record labels per se. Things are not, there's not necessarily Death Row and Bad Boy, um, Def Jam, um, and others. These things are they in name only for the most part because it's all about streaming. It's all about that, and um, I'll tell you, there's like so many artists that never even heard of. This is like, what is really going on? Many of these never heard of. And keeping an eye too on another matter, the Olympics, as we talked about on Monday, the Simone Biles' situation. Today, the latest report on that ankle injury, that calf injury, is that she is doing much better. And come Thursday, she should be in a great position to help lead her team to gold. And I think I had the gold count somewhere, um, and I just don't know what I did with it. Where was it? I mean, I last checked, it was the U.S. had 12 golds. And I think here we go. U.S. 20 total medals. I said 12 golds, 3 golds, 8 silver, and 9 bronze. This is the very last count. France was second with 16 total, but they had 5 golds, 8 silvers, and 3 bronze. Japan had 12 total medals, including 6 gold, 2 silver, and 4 bronze. So, um, if you're into the Olympics, if you're into that sort of thing, that is what's going on currently at the moment. Now, obviously, it could change at any second. The competition continues on a round the clock basis, and remember, they are what 5 6 hours ahead of us or something of that nature. I think it's 5 hours ahead of us in France. China actually is not doing bad either. They're right there with Japan with 12 medals, 5 gold, 5 silver, and 2 bronze. In fifth place is Great Britain. They have 2 golds, 5 silver, and 3 bronze for a total of 10. Australia has 9, as well as South Korea with Italy with 7, Canada with 5, and Kazakhstan with 3 total medals. That rounds out the top 10 over there in France. A lot of folks are over there too um, to check out the Olympics. So a lot of big time names and folks are there, but none other than our guy Flavor Flav continues to hold it down. This guy is as we said on Monday, all over the place there. So He's continuing to be as Chuck says, the Willie Nelson of hip hop, Mr. Everywhere Man, as his hit song with Chuck D earlier this year pronounced him as Mr. Everywhere Man. So that's the latest from the Olympics. The U.S. Men's basketball team, of course, is what folks have been really, really looking at, and so we will see what happens with the men's basketball team. And I tell you what, too. Speaking of basketball, and I gotta say this because Dawn Staley made some comments about how, and of course, she was very diplomatic about how Caitlin Clark probably could have made the team or should have made the team. Why is it? And she was asked the question. It wasn't that she brought it up, but she was asked the question, so she gave what she felt was an honest answer. But why is it that we continue to hear this? So are we saying that someone on that team didn't deserve to be on that team? How unfair is that? How unfair is that? This is a rookie. And yes, I get that you know, others have made it, made that team. But look, if she is as good as they want her to be, she'll make it the next time. She'll have another few years under her belt. She'll make it. But this idea that she is being and someone had the audacity to say that it was because of her race. I won't even dignify that individual, but it was a sports person. I won't even dignify that person with a calling their name out. But how ridiculous! And that's the thing; they want everything to be the other way. Black folks, brown folks can't have nothing. It's just like, come on, give me a break. Does Caitlin Clark um, is still finding her game like the other rookies, even Angel. As great a season as Angel's having, you have not seen nearly the best of what she's going to become. I mean, proof's in the pudding. I mean, look at other superstars that have come along and had really outstanding or great rookie seasons. They only got better because that's just the idea. You get better the more you play to the competition that the WNBA presents. I mean, this is much more talent, obviously, in the WNBA than there is in college basketball. It's a no-brainer. So uh, they all they all are learning. They all are going to get better. And this idea, I mean, they continually try. And to me, it seems like what they want to do is devalue everyone else. And see, that is that old adage of having to put someone down to boost yourself up. And they're doing the dirty work for Caitlin Clark. And that is the bottom line. And people say, well, maybe she's not doing it, they're doing it. Well, she's certainly not trying to put any to silence it at all. That's for sure. She's not in any way trying to silence it. And to me, it kind of speaks to who she is because you would want to not detract from your colleagues in this way. This is not Isaiah Thomas being frozen out of the men's basketball team back in the 90s. This is far from that. Isaiah definitely deserved to be on that Olympic team, but they froze him out. They froze him out because Michael Jordan said so. And that was a punk move on Michael Jordan's part. This was not that. This Caitlin Clark situation is not that. It's not that. So get a hold of yourselves, folks. Get a hold of yourselves. So we'll see. We'll see how these athletes continue to perform um, over there in Paris. Folks are still talking about that whole opening ceremony, not knowing what to make of it. So, but I tell you, the great thing about the opening ceremony, the one great thing about Celine Dion, and when you know her situation, and one of the things that makes Celine Dion's situation worse is the sound. This is why she can't perform, but she did to open the Olympics, which was amazing. The sound of loud noises, crowds, or any type of loud noise affects her condition, and so she really had to prepare for a long time and very strenuously for that. Um, and good for her. What a voice, and what a terrible tragedy that has happened to her. This they call it stiff person syndrome. What an absolute horrifying thing that she's having to deal with. But she really performed the way uh, Celine Dion and only a very few others could. And speaking of performances, so Palace of Versailles, I think it was Jennifer Hudson was in there. Now, I had the fortune of visiting the Palace of Versailles earlier this year, and so I feel like I can appreciate what she did yesterday even more. She's in there, and everything echoes in there. It's this huge palace, if you will, and it's like the walls, and so if you speak out loud, it's gonna bounce off the walls. Well, Jennifer Hudson sang. She sang a song and made everyone just stopped, and she did it like so impromptu. It just something moved her to sing there, and I can gather why. I mean, because if I had the voice and when I was there, I probably would have did the same thing. So, but she sang there, and she said she just had to. She just had to. So it's a lot of nice spots. I tell you what, I'd love to get back to Paris again. It was really really cool, and Jennifer Hudson took full advantage of being there, and she belted out a tune, and I'm sure anybody around that was touring that palace at the time was simply delighted. She certainly has a great voice. Simple as that. So, the Olympics seems like it's a lot of fun this year. So, Alma Johnson Powell, the wife of the late Secretary of State Colin Powell, has died. She was 86 years old, and her death was confirmed by the former diplomat's chief of staff and family spokesperson, Peggy Cifrino. She said that Miss Powell was the grounding force of our family. The couple's three children, Michael, Linda, and Anne Marie, actually sent the statement making that statement. They said during childhoods marked by consistent movement to new homes, we always felt secure because home was wherever she stood. She was an exemplary role model for us and for the world. She served our country alongside our father with intelligence and grace. We will miss her terribly, but take comfort in the fact that she had a life so well lived and is reunited with our father. The Powells were married for nearly 60 years, and Alma was by her husband's side during his remarkable and historic military career. The two met on a blind date in 1961, shortly before he was deployed to Vietnam as a military advisor. And he later rose to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, beginning under President George H.W. Bush and Secretary of State during George W. Bush's administration. 4 months after the Powells were married, I should say, was sent to Vietnam, leaving Alma to navigate the first few years of her life as a newlywed alone, which she later called, quote, the defining experience of my life. She says, part of who I am is because of my my career as a military wife. I think of the military as family. Wow. She says, during the course of our young lives, um, Her husband was often away. So, like many military spouses today, you're essentially a single parent. Your job was to make a home wherever you were. Home was where we were as a family, wherever that was. And what was believed to be Colin Powell's final interview, he told journalist Bob Woodard in July of 2021 that his wife was the greatest person that he'd ever known. What a tribute to say that about her, about your wife, right? He says she was always there for me, and she'd tell me that's not a good idea. She was usually right. One of those key decisions involved whether Colin Powell would seek the presidency as a Republican in 1996. At the time, of course, he enjoyed immense popularity as a key architect of the American led coalition's victory in the Gulf War. But the New York Times reported in 1995 that he decided against seeking the office based on the advice of his wife and children who worried about his safety in a bid to become the first Black commander in chief. Of course, we know about a dozen years later, Barack Obama became the first Black president. Alma Powell has died. One of the fun things about being a part of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press of America, is that we have so many legacy newspapers, so many great, great newspapers, family owned, that have been around in their families for decades, and in some cases over a century. And then in the case of the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, almost a century. They are celebrating their 90th anniversary this year. In fact, this month is the big celebration, August the 17th, in Minnesota at the Renaissance Minneapolis Hotel. It extends beyond that too, because one of the things that, of course, excites me is the fact that they're going to Paisley Park. So at least some invited guests are going to Paisley Park to help celebrate the 90th anniversary of the Spokesman Recorder. We had the privilege of sitting down with Tracy Dillard Williams, the publisher of the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, and talked about the newspaper's beginning, her grandfather, um, the newspaper's history, and where it's going for the next 90 years. Our conversation with Tracy Dillard Williams. Tracy Williams Dillard, the publisher of the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. Tracy, thanks for joining Let It Be Known.
Thank you for having me on. This is a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to the world that you present me with on some of the wonderful things that my heart is very passionate about.
Absolutely. Well, the newspaper has been a cornerstone in your community. 90 years. That's a long time. Can you share, Tracy, some of the most pivotal moments in the newspaper's history that have significantly impacted the direction of the Spokesman Recorder and its mission?
Well, I think one of the first and foremost is the founder, Cecil Newman, which is my grandfather.
Yep.
He started the paper in 1934, and his whole focus was, civil rights movement, really being able to um, be the voice for the voiceless. And even with opportunities for him to move to Washington, D.C., to sit next to the vice president of the United States at the time, which was Hubert Humphrey, his choice was to stay here to continue to open doors for the African Americans here in Minnesota. So that was one of the first starts to really showing, the pivoting of the opportunities that needed to exist for Black people here in Minnesota, that without my grandfather's determination to stay here and to be more determined to really be the voice for the Black community as our newspapers should represent, in opposed to his own selfish view of being able to move to DC and take a whole different course. Then, unfortunately, time moves on and we lost him.
Hmm.
Then the next stage was my grandmother taking it over, Leuna Newman, and her whole thing was being able to show that a woman could continue to run a newspaper, because that was the next move of the paper was, can a woman run a newspaper? Because then in 76, there was not a lot of female publishers. And so it was like the Sharks were ready to just take over once my grandfather passed, and she persevered. The thing was, my uncle came in, Jack Jackman, and kind of was alongside of her with my mother. And my uncle brought in the whole computer wave, which is now huge for all of us. But
Mhm.
he introduced just the computers at that time. And so that was another big turn in our publication in terms of really going from doing everything standing up on the at the board, pasting the newspaper, to actually putting it in the computer and sending it to our printer from the computer. So we had that as a change.
Mhm. And so, um, with you mentioned your grandfather, Cecil E. Newman. We know he's a legend out there, not just in Minnesota, but throughout. But how do you continue to uphold his vision for the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder while also adapting to the changing media landscape?
Well, upholding it, unfortunately, is, and I say this because it's unfortunate that the more things change, the more they remain the same. So when he first started this paper, he started it so that he could be the voice for the voiceless and be able to open doors that weren't otherwise opened for African Americans here in Minnesota and nationally, because there was a lot of reflecting that happened nationally as a result of what was going on here in Minnesota, as it still happens today with George Floyd and the police uprising and all that. So keeping what he has going and yet still being able to move into the new millennium and where we're at today, it's not changing anything. It's just enhancing it, and it's just the way the message is being delivered. We now have electronics, like we're on talking to each other in two different states today,
Hmm.
this morning. That wasn't heard of back when my grandfather started. Everything was by way of train. So there's a lot of stuff that we're still doing the same. It's just how we're disseminating the news and information. Otherwise, a
Yeah.
lot of it hasn't changed.
Yeah, and there is a lot of misinformation. What has changed, obviously, social media, citizen journalists, bloggers, and things of that nature. How do you ensure that the reporting of the spokesman recorder continues to be out front out there in Minneapolis? We saw the great job you did during the George Floyd situation, among other things. But how do you ensure that the spokesman recorder continues to be that go-to source for news despite the social media and the bloggers, etc.?
Well, not falling into the trap of that. So, not trying to stay ahead of that, but stay loyal to what we've been doing. And as our readers and new readers come along, they see the consistency in what we're doing. They see that a lot of what we're doing is all original content mostly, and that they can count on our original content because we're not changing because the news cycle's changing. We're
Right.
staying true to what we're writing about, and the things that impact our community. And then also Stacy looking at what impacts our African American community globally. So just staying true to our news coverage and not trying to jump on every bandwagon that's out there shows people that we're consistent and that our news coverage is something they can rely on.
Yeah. And speaking of the George Floyd murder and that situation that really, for a time there was this movement that went global. And again, you guys were out front. I know that we reached out a lot during that time here from the national office of NMPA to you guys. Um, Talk about, if you will, Tracy, some other more impactful stories that have affected the communities you serve.
Well, there was definitely a big story that we covered. There was some racism that was going on with Coca-Cola actually quite a while back. And I came in like on the tail end of that. That was kind of when I first took over the leadership of the paper. But I remember Coke coming in to our office and wanting to sit down because of the discrimination that was taking place. They wanted us to not talk about it anymore. And and there were some dollars on the table for sponsorship for some things we were doing. And that was the point where it was like, we're not interested in the dollars. We're interested in the news. And we're interested in informing our community. So that conversation continued and the dollars did not. And so that's one thing that we were able to make a change in terms of just staying out there. But then more recently, there was there was a neighborhood that was being up. It was primarily all African Americans, and it was what our community looks at as like where the projects were here in Minnesota and in North Minneapolis, to be more specific. And it was a home and degree that was going on. And so what they were doing is they were taking that whole community and they were uprooting it and they were rebuilding new homes. The concern was, are you rebuilding new homes with any of the people that are existing in the current dwellings in mind? And the answer was no. So we stayed on top of the articles and writing about how they had to make some of that dwelling available for low-income people, because you just uprooted a whole community of African Americans, low-income people, and now you're not talking about allowing them to come back into the neighborhood that they know. So over time, with our writing these stories, they had to end up opening up a lot of low-income housing in the units that they were building, brand new units, to allow at least a certain amount of African Americans that once lived in that community to have the opportunity to live in it once again. Again, without that news coverage, that would have never happened. They would have uprooted the community. They would have been out in the suburbs, and that whole gentrification was taking place, and we were able to be a footstep to stop that from disrupting and misplacing a lot of our readers.
Yeah, see, and that underscores the importance that newspapers, community newspapers in particular, have played throughout history, really, in the Black press, and Black-owned newspapers have been at the forefront of being advocates for their community. And so I think what Tracy has just explained to us is really one of those many examples that I'm sure she can tell us about. Tracy, also, you guys are known too for your community engagement, the strategic partnerships you might have locally there. Talk about, if you will, maybe an initiative that really stands out, other than the one you just described, but maybe another initiative that had an impact on fostering community involvement and support.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things that we've done in the past, Stacey. We did this event which we really want to recognize high school graduating seniors. And I think our seniors get overlooked a lot. Unfortunately, some of our community has, not the social background that maybe they're putting on big galas for their students or big parties. And then we have a lot of families that are single family households and the mother's working all day. And so we wanted to, as a community newspaper, say, you know what, we want to recognize and honor our high school graduating seniors. And a lot of people were like, well, why would you recognize high school students? That's kind of like an automatic. They should just automatically be graduating. You should be honoring college students. And I said, if you read some of the essays that we receive for the scholarships that we give, you would beg to differ. And the scholarship, Stacey, really talked about why it was so important that we put this event on. I couldn't read them myself because I couldn't have chosen which student was worthy. There were such heart-touching essays, but they talked about how they were getting up to get their brothers and sisters ready for school. They were cooking them breakfast. They were giving them baths. They were making sure they had their homework done. They were like mothering them because the mom was at work. So the older student was responsible, the older kid was responsible for making sure that the younger siblings got off okay. And then they went to school. Right. So it was just that so going to school and graduating and getting your education wasn't as easy as everyone thinks it just should have been. Because usually we have a parent or parents that are responsible for all of us. In this case, these kids were the parents. And yet they were able to persevere and graduate from high school. And that was a light story compared to a lot of them that I read, that I ended up reading or listening to, I should say, at the event when they read their essays. So understanding the importance and what that meant to the high school graduating seniors. Today, I have them come back and speak at other things I do. And they talk about that moment and what that meant to them and how they felt so proud of their accomplishment by being really known statewide about their accomplishment, not just their family and not just their neighborhood, but with the paper recognizing them really impacted how they moved in their further in their education. It was impactful. But then the other thing we do here locally, community engagement, is we have this event called Sister Spokesman. And it's a monthly event for African American women, and it's just an opportunity where the women can come together and really kind of get to know each other on a relaxed environment, kind of not like a normal routine that we usually experience with going to an event and sitting there and it's like a school setting. This is more of like sisterhood. I'm sorry, I thought I turned this phone off. So this is more like sisterhood where they're actually able to um, just kind of get together on a different base, and they get to get love and they get to get hugs and they get to shop with vendors, but they also get to learn what is important to each other, is that sisterhood. And so it's really become a great environment that we have going on with that event. And that's another one of our big community initiatives.
Yeah, and Tracy Greer, a great question she poses. She says, I realize that our community news focuses on community issues, but news has become very subjective. What are your thoughts about the state of journalism in this heightened political atmosphere?
Well, the state of journalism is very important right now. It's very, especially with the heightened political atmosphere. I think, again, back to what you mentioned earlier, Stacey, with some of the news coverage being what's being called fake news. I think it's important that we educate our community as best we can, still staying where we're not deciding for our readers, our community, who's the best political candidate for them, but actually giving them information that they don't otherwise have. Being able to be a stronger source than what they see with the daily news and watching the TV shows that are out there that are either one way or another. But just really, I think when people don't know what to do, they need to get the information that's impactful enough for them to make their own decision. And that's what we lean on here at the Minnesota
Yeah.
Spokesman-Recorder. We're more interested in writing the news and informing our readers that are going to engage and inspire them to make their own educated decisions. And I think as
Yeah.
good journalism, that's what we're able to do.
Are you concerned, Tracy, about the potential threats to journalism?
I'm not. I know there's a lot of different perspectives out there in terms of the livelihood of us, and I think that a lot of it'll never go away. It'll never
Right.
go away. News can never go away. Journalism can never go away. I think what is important is that we're able to stay on top of what inspires our readers, our community, and that's what's going to keep us alive, and that's what's going to keep any threats from happening.
Yeah, and Tracy, a couple of more things. We're going to get to the anniversary in one moment, but I know that in 2015, something very, very special happened. The Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder building was designated a historic landmark. What does that recognition mean to you and the community, and how do you see the pay source evolving in the future?
Well, I think it means just that that now it's something that's been in this community for a long time, long enough to be able to be recognized as a historical landmark. I think that historically people look at longevity that we don't have in our communities. A lot of our communities may have old buildings that sit there, but are they still being operated by the original founder? Do the buildings still look kept up? Are the buildings still representing what they originally were supposed to represent? That is what the longevity and what that means to me to have an historical landmark, is to be able to say, you can drive up in front of my building and still be as proud of it sitting here as a historical landmark in today's look. It still doesn't look old, because my grandfather was smart when he had this building built. So he had it built with brick, so it still keeps it's timeless. And
Yes.
it's just keeping it so that the community can feel proud of it, is what I think is what makes it a nice historical landmark for people to feel comfortable coming to and visiting.
The 90th anniversary. Um, tell us, first of all, what to expect. I know you got some big plans in the month of August for the 90th anniversary. What are we to expect with the 90th anniversary, and talk about, if you will, some of the future goals that the newspaper has going forward for the next 90 years.
Well, the 90th anniversary, we're just trying to really, and that is exactly it, Stacy, to set the roadmap in front of all of our attendees to what they can expect for the next 90 years. And we're celebrating our past. We're celebrating my grandfather. We're celebrating my grandmother, my mother, my uncle. We're celebrating all the soldiers that came before me. But we're also celebrating the opportunity to educate the community more. So we just created a traveling photo museum, which we're going to present at the gala. And it's going to be really exciting for people to be able to see it. And this exhibit will go to schools and to City Hall and to all these different locations that, number one, are trying to celebrate. We pretty much are certain on Black History Month, but certainly hoping that this exhibit will inspire people to want to use it throughout the year and not just during Black History Month. A lot of history in it. It's very well put together, and it's going to be an exhibit that we're going to grow. So this is just the beginning of it at the gala, where we're going to have it in the silent auction area. But moving forward, it'll be accessible. We already have one client already that just heard about it and wants the exhibit at their event. So that's exciting, but that's just an ongoing thing that we're planning on doing. Also, just building more on our social media campaigns and really expanding our news coverage, because we realize that Minnesota is definitely our base, but it's not all where all the African Americans are. And we know that issues that we deal with here are dealt with in New York, they're dealt with in Chicago, they're dealt with all across the country. So how can we be the leading recorder of this, and how can we set precedents on how things are done right in terms of getting a better outcome? So that's our goal.
Now, Tracy, in the business, the journalism business, they say you buried the lead. Because the lead for me and for many others in Minneapolis, I'm not in Minneapolis, but you might as well put me in Minneapolis, is this special place that you guys are going to go to. I know not everyone is going with you, but I know that enough of you guys are going. And we're talking about Paisley Park. We're talking about the one and only Prince Rogers Nelson. And I know that at Paisley Park this past week and at First Avenue and other locations, they've been celebrating the anniversary of Purple Rain. Talk about the fact that you are going to Paisley Park, what that means. And by the way, was the Purple Genius a subscriber to the Minneapolis Spokesman-Recorder, or Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder?
And I think it just means that a lot of people are very looking forward to seeing Paisley Park. It's phenomenal. Prince in himself, he was a phenomenal guy. He was a genius.
Come on, tell us something we don't know. We know he was phenomenal.
Ahead of his time.
That's
and
right.
So the places, I went out there last year, a couple of times I've been out there, and I think it's a place to see. When you're in Minnesota, that's one place that you want to see while you're here. There's many places. But I think that the publishers, it's going to be a treat for them, and they're the only ones that are going to be seeing it with us during that weekend. And I just think that Prince, I don't know, to be honest, that he was a subscriber. I do know that he kept up with what we were talking about because his family's here. A lot of his family members are subscribers. And so he did keep up with the news. And it's as same as the other icon from Minnesota, Jimmy Jam. I see he follows us on Twitter. So we know that they keep up with us. They just keep up with us in the ways that they keep up with news.
Yes. Yeah, that is pretty awesome. We all know, whether you were a big Prince fan or not, you have to say that you missed this guy for sure. Tracy, before you go, talk about the legacy. Who's going to carry that torch? I mean, I know that you plan to be around for a while, and we expect you to be around for a while, but who's going to carry that torch for the next 90 years?
I'm really glad you asked me that question, Stacey. I think about it. People used to ask me that a while ago, and I thought, I don't know. I don't have any other family that's in line. Nobody that's really shown an interest in media. Media is a hard thing, because it's evolving all the time, and you have to constantly stay up with the evolving. And it's not necessarily a place that you're gonna, an industry that you're looking at. I'm gonna run a newspaper so I can become a millionaire. It's really more of a passion that most of us as publishers have when it's community newspapers. We're driving a passion, and we're driving it
Yeah.
because it has good causes. So thinking about who wants to come behind you and have that passion is not always an easy answer. But I have a daughter who I looked at and I was like, T, I got to bring you on. This is your legacy. You're going to carry the torch. And at first she was like, "Nah, mom, I don't think so." She's got her own education. She wants to be an educator. That's her focus. But she
Right.
came in one year to do some volunteer work, and she started seeing some of the old archives, and she started really realizing the strength that the Black press has, and specifically potentially her Black press has. Looking at what the awards, the countless awards my grandfather received, the countless awards my grandmother and my mother received, and now looking at some of the current ones I've received, she's seen the impact that we're all having running this paper. And she began to start to see, I believe, herself in this chair. This was the chair, well, this not necessarily the chair, but the desk that my
Right.
grandfather sat at. And I think she can see herself sitting at this desk.
Mm.
And I have tried to kind of show her now the connection between education, because it's a strong connection between education, which she is an educator, and a newspaper. It's what we do every day. We're educating the community. So I
Yes.
think she's beginning to see the difference the connection. And so my goal is to retire in 10 years, which would bring me to the 100th celebration. And so this event is around carrying the legacy of the paper. In 10 years from now, when we're celebrating 100 years, it'll be the title will be Passing the Torch.
There you go, passing the torch. And real quick, Tracy, speaking of anniversaries, of course, in less than 3 years, the Black Press of America will have its 200th anniversary. What does that mean to be a part of that, Tracy?
It means so much. It means to say that we're a part of the legacy that the Black press is carrying, and that it's an impact not just in Minnesota, but it's a national impact. We all have the same mission: to educate, inform, and enlighten our community. And it feels good to be a part of an organization that has that same joint initiative nationally.
Absolutely. Tracy uh, Dillard Williams, we really appreciate you joining us today on Let It Be Known. And everybody, check out the 90th anniversary. Is there a website or something, Tracy, that they can go to?
Absolutely. Yes, it's spokesman, Spokesman hyphen recorder, RECORDER.com.
All right. And can folks buy tickets to the anniversary celebration?
We still have tickets available. And if there's any questions, they can always call 612-827-4021, and we can answer any questions. 612-827-4021. Tickets are still available. We'd love to have fly in and attend if you're not in Minnesota. It's going to be an excellent program.
It'll be worth flying in for. Absolutely. Appreciate it. The Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, 90 years. Folks, subscribe to them. You don't have to be in Minnesota to subscribe. You can be anywhere. Subscribe to them. Check out their website and continue to support them. 90 years. Folks, family owned, Black owned. Doesn't get any more authentic than that. Thanks a lot, Tracy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
Thank you. So, Tracy Dillard Williams, that was fantastic. Again, subscribe to the Minnesota's Spokesman Recorder. Subscribe to your local Black owned newspaper and subscribe to the Black Press, blackpressusa.com. But also make sure you go to our YouTube page, the Let It Be Known's YouTube page, LIBK news on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Tell all your friends, tell all your family, tell your wife, tell your kids, tell them all, subscribe, 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 and then share it. Let it be known. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.